And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope you're all doing well. I'm very happy to have you back here for another interview with a member of the European Parliament. Tonight, we will discuss with MEP Malte Gallée, who is from German MEP from the Greens EFA groups on the left side of EU politics. He's 29 years old, so he's actually the youngest German MEP, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, is a German MEP since 2021. So that means he's been in an MEP for less than a year right now. So now that he's in the parliament, he's a member of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, and he's a substitute in the Committee on the Development and the Committee on the Internal Market and Consumer Protection. We will discuss that at length, but he works quite a lot on the topic of circular economy, waste management, waste policy, and development policy. But before we start the interview and the conversation, as usual, a small reminder of the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will be with us for about an hour. After that, he will go and enjoy the rest of his evening, and you will be stuck with me for another half an hour to discuss with you what you thought of the interview, provide additional explanation, answer additional questions if you have any, these kind of things. As usual, I have prepared my own question for Mr. Gallée, and I collected questions from people on Reddit and Discord. You can, of course, ask your question in the chat. It's there for that. I will keep an eye on it, and I will pick among your suggestions. So feel free to participate and to react, but as always, don't spam and stay civil. So the goal of this interview is for you to better understand who your MEPs are, what they do in your name, and hear a bit about their views on European politics in general. And since we're talking about European politics, we will not cover national politics unless it's related to EU politics. So keep that in mind when asking your questions. And on this note, I suggest that we dive right in. Good evening, Malte Gallée. Thank you very much for coming tonight with us and answer the questions, my question and the question of the chat. So you heard me do the little introduction, say who you are, in which committee you are. Is there anything that I missed that you would like to add?
I'm also in quite some delegations, and if I look at my delegations that I'm in, I recognize that I think I cover half of the world.
Easy.
Because I managed to get into ACP EU delegation, so the African, Caribbean, Pacific and European Union Joint Parliamentary Assembly, which is pretty cool. The Mediterranean delegation, which covers all the countries around Mediterranean Sea. Then the Maastricht countries, they're basically like covering also Mediterranean countries. You know, it's like Egypt and Lebanon and Syria, this corner, and the South Asia delegation, which is basically everything in South Asia except for India. But otherwise, I think this was a really nice introduction.
Perfect. I'm happy. I'm doing my job well. But first, so let's dive a bit into you actually. How and why did you go into politics and later became an MEP? What was the spark for you?
Well, I joined the Young Greens in Germany in 2010. Back then, it was mainly for all these ecological reasons and also to fight nuclear power plants, which was a really hot topic back then, and also like some transport politics in my area. I come from southern Germany. Everybody who comes from southern Germany probably knows Stuttgart 21. This was like a really big thing back then, and I went after school in 2013. I went to Tanzania. I was working there for 1 year in the renewable energy sector for the Tanzania Renewable Energy Association. I was basically lobbying for renewable energies down there. And so this whole international trade and the rules that we give to ourselves, this just kept stayed in my mind. And so in 2018, actually, I heard about that people are running for the green list for the European elections, and I went through all these applications, and I was like, okay, there's nobody under the age of 30. This is weird. I mean, like, we're quite the big part of the population still, young people. And I mean, like, we are those who are most affected by the laws that we give to ourselves. So I thought, okay, I got quite some ideas and plans for this wonderful project, European Union. So I decided to run, and I was successful. I run for the place number 22. I was elected in a second round against 7 others, and then a bit unfortunate. At the European elections, only 21 of our list got elected. So from then on, I was the leading candidate of the successors list. But yeah, I had to wait until last December to succeed. And now now I can really do the real politics, and it's quite an honor and a big task. And it's really amazing, I have to admit, so far.
And so how did the transition go? Because like it's been less than a year that you've been an MEP. You arrived pretty much after the mandate, so that means that everyone or all the other MEPs already called dibs on the different topics. Did you have a chance to actually make your mark in there, or has it been just playing catch up with the others?
No, well, I do indeed feel that, okay, they are far more into many of the topics, and I'm not that professional, not that an expert yet in many regards. But still, I realized, I mean, like back then when I was running, I mainly was also running for as you said already, for the topic of circular economy, like how to fight companies that basically design products in a way so that they break after 2 years. This whole thing of plant obsolescence, like how can we reduce the waste that is produced. This was one of the main topics I ran for during my campaign. And when I arrived, I realized, okay, the whole topic, okay, there are many people working on circular economy, but nobody really with a focus on waste reduction. So I was really lucky to also claim this area for myself and collect quite some files in this area. So yeah, this is how it went so far. I was also really, really lucky to get the file, like the battery regulation from my predecessor, who was the shadow on this one, because I think this is a really prominent file, and it was also like the very first one of its kind, like covering like the whole value chain of a product for the very first time. And so yeah, this was a really, really lucky thing to happen, so that I could work on this and like get to know the processes in European Parliament through this file.
So we'll go a bit further into waste policy and the circular economy. But first, I have a couple of like very general questions, actually, more about what it is to work as an MEP. And every once in a while, I think it's good to go back to the basics. So I had someone who was asking how are MEPs being briefed about all the different topics that they're working on. How do they collect information? Is it just your assistant? Do you meet other people? Where do you get all the information from?
Well, I mean, like, it's sure we cannot know it all by heart or know it all by ourselves. This is why we have our teams who brief us. And of course, also why we meet lobbyists in the end. I mean, like, everybody knows about lobbyists and the European Parliament, and it's a really big issue. And I think it's also a right to shine a bright light on what is going on with lobbyism in European Parliament. But yeah, lobbyists are basically the main source of knowledge, I would say. But there are different kinds of lobbyists, of course. Like for me, or I think I can speak for us as Greens, we mainly focus to meet with lobbyists who represent like civil society or environment organizations. like I don't know, WWF or Amnesty International, or name them. They are also lobbyists representing like the people, and then there are of course like lobbyists that represent the industry, that have other demands or other opinions, and so basically you for a topic you meet different kinds of stakeholders and listen to them and listen to their arguments, like I did for the battery regulation, for example. I did a whole battery tour all over Europe. I went to Sweden and Finland and to many stakeholders in Germany, and like just try to learn as much as possible about batteries in general, so that I get an idea about like what am I regulating there. And of course, like the main source of briefings is the own team who are always with us in the briefings, who also do like the lobbyists meetings on their own. So I'm not like meeting all the lobbyists on my own, but it's also my team. And yeah, it's a really big privilege that you have so many that basically you can get so much information from wherever possible.
And now that you've been like in the job for 1 year in the parliament, someone was asking how do you compare MEPs with members of your national parliament, members of the German parliament? Would you say that the German MP is more powerful? Is the MEP more powerful? If you can compare, let's say, the level of power, I don't know.
Well, I mean, like I'm from Germany, but I think this is a problem all over Europe. I can imagine that the national parliaments, they take themselves far too serious. I always, we have the German Bundestag, and I'm not even sure if everybody in Germany even knows that there is a European Parliament, even though I think we are far more powerful. So I want to establish that we do not talk about the German Bundestag anymore, but only about Europe's biggest regional parliament. So this is my goal, to establish this kind of wording, to also show that the direction we want to go to, which is basically, of course, like United States of Europe thing. So of course I think MEPs are far more powerful than national parliamentarians, but I think most of national parliamentarians, they do not agree with me there.
I wonder why. I do wonder why. But now let's dive into your actual work now that you're in Parliament. So you mentioned that you work on circular economy, and circular economy has become a bit of a bigger topic at European level over the past few years. We've seen the EU look into a number of consumer issues, because usually it's looked at from the single market perspective. We've seen the battery regulation. We've seen the common charger. We are looking. There are discussions about planned obsolescence in general. So how is the EU tackling the issue?
Well, first of all, let's say, okay, why are we talking about circular economy at all? I mean, like, of course, the concept is old, but I think a very crucial point is like the general goal of the European Green Deal of becoming climate neutral as fast as possible, which I think is a really big gain of civil society that went to the streets in 2019 asking for exactly that. But yeah, so a circular economy how is it done? I mean, like, if we look, for example, at the Waste Framework Directive, there's a really interesting thing. It's called the waste hierarchy, So it's basically saying, okay, how do we want to get rid of how do we want to abandon waste in general? And it says, okay, first of all, we have to not produce waste at all. Second thing is, okay, we have to have products that we can reuse, and then only at the third priority, it's how can we recycle the products? And then in the end, it's like, okay, how can we like maybe burn them or something? So basically, recycling is only the third best option. And I think this is something really crucial if we discuss the circular economy, because this is something I experienced right now a lot. Like, okay, every company there. So yes, we are so circular. You can recycle it, but you can recycle everything. It's just the question, like, how easy is it? So we really want to push for how do we get away from recycling, but to reuse. Because circular economy basically, of course, aims at producing no waste anymore. And if we have only products that can be reused all the time, then of course we do not produce so much waste anymore. And what I think what is really crucial, like for example, with what we started in the battery regulation, is that we say, okay, we for new products, we say, okay, they have to consist with a part of recycled content, and like this, for example, we really push the industry towards a real circular economy, because we like create an artificial demand of recycled content, and yeah, like this we can move away from like just always using things only once and then throwing them away. And I think this is like one little part of this whole circular economy that is on a good way, and we're working on in different files at the moment.
And beyond the mere like reuse or recycling of products that we may have, what are other dimensions of circular economy that people might not know about? Because recycling, that I hope everyone is aware that recycling exists and does recycle, but beyond that, what is inside the circular economy?
You mean like from a legislative
yes.
view right now? Okay, so we for a circular economy, for example, what is in there? We have, for example, we are working on construction products, like buildings, like bricks and stuff. They are like barely recycled. I think only 1% of production on construction products are recycled at the moment, even though they create, I think, half or 1/3 of all the waste that is created in Europe. And so there we basically saw, okay, this is a huge problem. I mean, like we're really like creating so much waste in this area. So in this on this file, like the construction products, I think it's a regulation. We are working on, okay, how to make them more circular and how to make them less toxic as well. I think this is also like a really crucial part of circular economy. We cannot use toxic materials if we want to recycle them. So, for example, how do we shift towards hemp in the construction products, for example, or let's go for the packaging and packaging waste directive. We are really waiting for that one. It's supposed to come out in November now. They delayed it like so many times already. But I think, for packaging, everybody can see it in his or her daily life. Like, if you just remember during Corona times, like all these single-use food boxes, for example, it's so horrible. I don't know, sometimes when I'm traveling, I have to pass through a train station, Frankfurt airport. There's like a Chinese restaurant. They only have single-use plates, like even if you sit down, they give you a single-use plate. And so the packaging of food, or packaging in general, is an area where we can really change a lot, where we can move a lot away from single use to reuse. I mean, like, I guess it's familiar to everybody, the German fund system, like deposit return scheme. I think this is, in general, deposit return schemes, I think this is something we really should push for in as many areas as possible, because this really gives back value to resources that we basically do not recognize anymore. What else do we have in the circular economy? Another file I will work on, which is also like really interesting. It's the end of life vehicles directive. This is basically like eco design for cars. You know, so end of life of a vehicle. I mean, like if the vehicle is broken, you cannot use it anymore. Like, what design requirements do we put on car manufacturers so that the car is recyclable? Because so far until now, I think it's only like 30% of something recyclable, or even if it's more. But I mean, like, it's just a huge source of waste as well.
And in terms of, you're saying that, like, for instance, the car, only 30% maybe of the car can be recycled, but like, is the 70 other percent like things that you could fully recycle, or what is the part that it would be actually impossible to recycle? So what is the margin of maneuvers actually for a number of products? Like, because I can imagine that whether in construction, whether we're talking about cars, there is a part that cannot be recycled at all. So what is the margin of maneuvers in there?
Well, I just was at the event at the Bavarian embassy in Brussels. You know, this little castle there.
Yes.
And there was a Bavarian car manufacturer that I don't want to name right now, but they, for example, they claimed that they had like a model there where they said this is made 100% out of recycled material. So of course it is possible. It's just a design question. I mean, like, if you only think like, okay, how do I glue stuff together, or how do I create the design? How do I design it in the very first place? The design is a really crucial thing, and I think that most of the problems can be solved through design, but we just have to come up with the rules for it.
I have a question in the chat related to, let's say, waste management in general. So the question is, how are you going to prevent the outsourcing of waste production to less regulated countries? Because we know that there is a lot of waste that are being sent outside of Europe for whatever reason, either just to stock or whatever. So how are you going to how is the EU doing anything to let's say prevent this kind of outsourcing?
Indeed, actually, in this very moment, we in the European Parliament are working on the waste shipment directive, or is it regulation? I'm not sure if it's a regulation or a directive. Still, waste shipment, basically, it's just like, of course, like shipment of waste, either inside or outside EU. And for us as Greens, one priority is to ban the shipment of plastic waste. Because I think, you all have seen the images of plastic waste ending up somewhere in the Southeast Asian beaches with German or French packaging waste or plastic just ending up there because we ship it there. So there we are active already. So it's basically, how do we ensure that the waste also becomes recycled? And just in August, I was in Kenya, in Nairobi, and there I visited the biggest dump site of Eastern Africa. It's really horrible. You can imagine, like, it's just waste, piles of waste, like as far as you can see. And working conditions there is also like super horrible. I think there are like 6 people per year that are just killed by the trucks that dump the waste there, because basically like a no man's land, so nobody cares what's going on there, and of course it's all illegal and stuff. And there you really saw, okay, what the throwaway society, I don't know if this is an English word,
we'll say it is.
Really creates as a global impact. I mean, like, of course, not all waste that ends up at this very dump site is from Europe, even though a big part of it is. But I mean, like, a lot of the products down there, even though they don't come directly from Europe, are designed in Europe. And if we already, I mean, like we are one of the biggest single markets in the world. If we really shift away from single use, this will have a global impact, and this will lead to less waste all over the world and to more value to the bare resources. And so this is indeed an area we are working on, also with the sustainable product initiative. I think this is a file that goes into this direction, like how we can reduce waste in general, or that also aims at this. But there's a lot going on in this regard, and I think now in end of September, end of beginning of October, negotiations will start with the waste shipment directive or regulation. I'm not sure, but just keep an awakened eye on it and put some pressure on the, let's say, on the conservatives who are not so much in favor of forbidding plastic waste shipment.
And so
warmly welcome.
And since you're saying like the conservatives do not support like the ban on plastic, single-use plastic, let's say, what are the arguments? Well, how do they justify saying, "Oh, we're not supporting this"?
Well, basically because also recycling industry says, we are a global industry. Like we have our recyclers outside of Europe. For example, in Turkey, I'm not like perfectly into this file. I'm not the shadow on it, but this is the main argument I heard, that also recycling industry is a global industry, so we basically destroy their market share. But this is just a thing I don't really believe, because if you look where the waste goes in the end, like recycling companies in Turkey that do not exist, so to addresses that do not exist, and so this is their main argument, that we destroy the market for them. But I think it's important because we have to deal with we have to learn to deal with our waste, and this we have to face the consequences of our waste by ourselves. So this is why I'm really in favor of banning plastic waste shipment.
Let's move away a bit from waste and circular economy. Last week was the State of the Union, so the big political speech of the year for the EU, and there was a big part of it that was dedicated to energy, because the energy crisis is the big political topic for the EU over the past few months. Even if you're not specialized on energy topics, etc., what was your reaction to what Ms. van der Leyen proposed to, let's say, handle the energy crisis? Were you satisfied or positively? Did you have a positive reaction to what she announced, or do you think she could have done more?
Well, in general, I think we now really face the consequences of what we failed within the last years. I mean, Greens have been, or also me personally, we have been pushing for energy independence from Russia for the last years already, for so long, and we really see how urgent it is needed to become independent of fossil fuels. So I'm not totally into energy policy anymore, but I think it's also a good thing that now we really experience how important it is to really become independent, and that there is so much happening right now, and that also all over Europe we realize, okay, we have to go for 100% renewables as fast as possible, and I think this is it's a good and important step.
Someone had asked a question, and since you mentioned that you starting your let's say you work in the Greens on nuclear energy, I will ask the question: do you you're German, you know there's big debates about nuclear energy. There's been lately debates on do we keep or do we not keep in action some of the nuclear plants that they were planning to get rid of. So do you think that the position of the Greens on nuclear power is, let's say, tenable in the context of the energy crisis, and where there's a climate crisis that requires let's say a decarbonation of our countries?
Well, I mean, like the energy crisis at the moment is mainly because of France's nuclear power plants are unable to deliver. So we just see, okay, nuclear power plants is nuclear power is no solution to the energy problems. And also right now in Germany, we just see how dangerous they still are. Like yes, of course, we are talking about prolonging them, but for example, for ISA 2, like the Bavarian nuclear power plant that is still active, they now realize, oh, there are some cracks in this I don't know what very part, but yeah, it's not as secure as we always thought, and like in general. I think it's just so short-term thought to invest in nuclear power, because we will have this waste for the next hundreds of thousands of years. We now do create waste for the future generations and future generations and future generations. So I just don't see it balancing out. I mean, like, every investment in something else than renewables is just an investment that destroys the capability of capacity of future generations to live on this planet. So I strongly oppose this also now, of course.
Okay, let's now dive a bit into your work in the DEVE committee. And actually, let's start with a bit of news. So I saw on Twitter over the last few days that you've been involved in a bit of a shitstorm there because of a recent resolution of the parliament on Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. So could you explain what went wrong in all this? Why suddenly do we have a shitstorm about Ugandan people being pissed off at you?
Yeah, they like the Ugandan government. They have declared me to their enemy number one, I guess. Which is not that bad, because Ugandan government are rather dictators, I would say, or at least an autocrat. I mean, like, the president is in office for 36 years now. Or something, like locking away opposition and something. So it's okay to have them as enemies, I think. But what happened? End of July, as I said, like in August, I was in Kenya. Before, I was in Uganda, and I met. Well, first of all, let me start from the very beginning. In 2006, they discovered oil at Lake Albert in Uganda. It's one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. They discovered, like, I think 7 billion barrels of oil there, with 1.5 billion barrels of oil directly accessible. And so they were looking for investors, blah, 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 how to get this oil out. And now they have the plan to build a pipeline, a 1,443 kilometer heated pipeline from Lake Albert around Lake Victoria up to Tanga in Tanzania to ship it to the world, basically. And the project is already starting, and so there is the land acquisition process going on. And during this process, there were really severe human rights violations. Like, people got just chased off their land without compensation, or just too little compensation, or super late compensation. So, which basically left families with no income and being unable to send their children to school. Environment and human rights activists got locked away with for no reason. People got death threats if they were opposing this project and stuff like this. So when we were there, I was there with 3 other colleagues. We met, I think, all over like 60 or 70 people who told us, like the so-called project effective people, who told us about these human rights violations. And also there are big environmental concerns, for the seismic activity in this region, for example, or how they build the pipeline over the rivers and stuff. So there are severe risks of oil spill, for example, and all of this was not really recognized by Total Energies. So it's the French company that is involved in this project with 62%. So the major share of this project belongs to a non-African company, and leaving Uganda with only 15% share, and Tanzania with 15% share, and then I think 8% for UNOC, so the Chinese oil company. And so we in the European Parliament decided to start an urgent resolution on these human rights violations and environmental concerns. And we got it through successfully, even though I have to admit there are still some, it's no so good language in the resolution itself. I would prefer to have some other points in, for example, but also focus a bit more on our international treaties and stuff, and also push for alternatives that really provide energy sovereignty for the local people. But that's beside. We were successful with this resolution, and then Ugandans all these people that profit from oil and that are linked to the regime there, they really started raging. The speaker of Ugandan parliament called us imperialists and neo-colonialists and racists, just on the very day where we got the resolution through. And I am pretty sure, that he didn't even read the resolution, because I was analyzing it afterwards, and I mean, it's a fair point. As a country that was colonized for quite some time, I think it's good to always double check. Okay, is there like a neo-colonial aspect or an imperialist aspect to anything that comes from outside of our country? But looking at the resolution and also considering, okay, basically we're just the messenger, we give the voice to those people we met in Uganda that complained and that said, okay, we don't feel safe with this regime, like police is threatening us. We still felt obliged to go public with this. And on the other hand, I really have to say, I think it's completely the other way around. If there is any imperialist note or something, then it's indeed Total Energies, which is a European company holding the major share on this project, and basically only exporting raw materials unprocessed to international markets. The funny thing is, in Ugandan government, they only passed a law last year that forbids the export of unprocessed raw materials, which makes totally sense. I think that's genius, because this is a huge problem of African countries in general. I think that they are only raw materials exporter, but there's no local value creation, And this is why, they just stay poor. Why people in Karamoja region, it's so resource rich, but they're, when I came there, the very first day I read the news, on a front page of the newspaper was written 900 people died from hunger, you know, because they have the fourth skipped rain season now already, you know, like really climate crisis is kicking in there the hardest. And so so it makes totally sense to say, okay, we want value creation like in the country, so we want to process our raw materials in the country. And so they passed this law that says, okay, we forbid the export of unprocessed raw materials, but for some reason crude oil is no raw material. I don't know. And so this is one spin that I find really interesting in this whole debate. And then of course, like now all these oil lobbyists, they as I said, call us racist, call us imperialists, and also like a lot of you in Germany, you started your coal power plant. How do you dare to talk about us here? And I mean, fair, of course, but I mean, like I oppose every fossil fuel project on this planet. I think we really have to cut them all down and have to boost renewable energies like all over the world, and especially Uganda. I mean, like they have twice the amount of sun hours per year than we have in Germany or France as well, I guess. So a solar panel produces double the amount of kilowatt hours. So it just makes so much sense to invest in renewables instead of this stupid oil project. But so this is really cooking hot on Twitter at the moment. It's really interesting. So I'm also really lucky that my IMCO trip to Paris got cancelled, so I got time to take care of everything that's going on in Uganda. I mean,
you made a few friends.
We indeed did. I mean, like all the civil society organizations, they are so grateful for this, you know, because we really started the debate in Uganda about the project, you know, like this. Like the point that they should not export unprocessed raw materials, and that Uganda only holds 15% in the ECOP project. This was something I wasn't aware that they weren't aware, but many people were not aware. I mean, like so many bloggers with, I don't know, 100,000 followers or something in Uganda, they were like, oh, is this real? Oh, shit. Somebody is selling out our country. And so I think this was a really good thing to do that really changed a lot and really started a big discussion. Topic ECOP is trending on Twitter in Uganda for 3 days now already, or 4 days. So
at least
it's a success, even though it's a bit painful.
Yeah, at least it creates a debate. Someone in the chat, since you were talking about renewable energy, is making the comment that the problem with the renewable energy is that it's difficult to store the power, which creates unstable electricity prices. So, what's your take on on this issue of storage of energy, which is indeed a technological issue?
Well, of course, totally true. This is a big challenge we have to deal with. But I mean, like we have the solutions for this. If you only look at the battery in a Tesla, for example, or a Mercedes or whatever other car, like the big ones, they have like I think 100 kilowatt hours now. With this battery, you can provide energy for a 4-person's household or for a full house for like a month or something. So just to have it in mind, like what batteries are capable of. And I mean, like there are so many. For example, if you think of geothermal energy, this is an energy. This is just constant. You know, you're not dependent on the wind and solar and stuff. But yeah, of course, we have to change our consumption. Of course, we have to consume more when there's more available. And for the rest, we need storage. We need far more storage. That's indeed true as well. I mean, like we also have like all these Yeah, what is in German? It's Pumpspeicherkraftwerk. It's
I
like
can't help you on this one.
pumping storage, if for for water, like a dam, where you
Yes.
pump water up and then let water down. This is like an easy way how you can store like a lot of energy. And for example, this is like where we really need to integrate our or more integrate our European network. For example, to really use the dams up in Norway, for example, or down in Portugal, to store this energy if it's available. But yeah, we just have to invest in storage and renewables at the same time, of course. But I mean, like the technology is there; it's all possible, it's all doable. We just have to do it.
Going back to on the DV committee, what else are you working on in the DV committee besides apart from the shitstorm on Uganda? What do you do?
One really interesting file I'm working on, it's the Corporate Social Due Diligence Directive, CS3D.
Sounds sexy.
I'm working on it is who it is. It is well, it's basically like supply chain due diligence, value chain due diligence. So we want European companies to respect human and environmental rights, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. Because I mean, like what we're doing at the moment and why so many industries are shifting away is just because somewhere else people just don't care, or company, I don't know, weak institutions and stuff, human rights violations are more easy done or whatever, or I don't know, even slave work, forced labor and stuff like this. And so basically we are putting our European companies into a huge disadvantage over those who exploit people outside of Europe. And this is what we want to stop with this directive. So we want to hold companies accountable for respecting human rights everywhere in the world. This means, for example, we want them to give a grievance to create grievance mechanisms, so that if there are human rights violations, that then the people they can complain about it, and that there is compensation mechanism. And like this, we think we can really create a level playing field, and also favoring industries in Europe that really do comply, because exploitation will not be as cheap anymore for those who do not behave in a good way, let's say. And this is also one reason why this resolution about the human rights violations in Uganda and Tanzania at the moment is so important, because in France there is already such kind of a law, and it's the very first time now that this law is used against a company, against Total. I think the first negotiation is on 12th of October or something, the first court event.
Mhm.
And there I think it's really, really important to make a really clear statement that we are awake, and that we are watching, and that we do care of what European companies do outside of Europe. And so this is a really interesting project I'm working on. Another thing is I will join the Joint Parliamentary Assembly of the ACP EU delegation again in the end of October. It will be in Mozambique. And I hope that I will find some time afterwards as well to visit some mining in Eastern Africa. I actually planned this for my trip now already, but I could not find we didn't get it managed to didn't get it organized because in the whole topic of circular economy, we know we will need far more resources, and resource extraction is a really crucial topic. Well, if we look at human rights violations, there are a lot of them are going on in this area, and so if we want to shift towards a circular economy where we do need far more critical resources, we also have to make sure that the mining is done without human rights violations, for example. I mean, like also Ursula von der Leyen was talking about this in her speech on the State of the Union. Like she announced like a critical raw materials act or something. She called it something like this. And just to basically my aim is to meet stakeholders and to meet affected people and to learn like what is important to them, and just think about how we can draft this legislation in a way that everybody on this planet profits.
I have two questions from the chat. First, let's go back to the previous topic when you were talking about preventing European companies from violating, let's say, human rights outside of Europe to produce things. And so in the chat, someone was asking, will that go beyond human rights violation? Like, will it cover like chemicals or environmental pollution that is being done by European companies, or is it unrelated? So it would be another piece of legislation.
Basically, it's I mean, like it's in the process. We did not have any shadow meetings on this yet, so nothing is done yet. Everything is still possible, but of course we want to make it as strong as possible. And like mine or our focus as Greens, of course, will also be to not only focus on human rights, but also to on the environmental rights, for example, or environmental protection in general. And I mean, like we got so many treaties and stuff on an international level. Let it be from ILO, International Labor Organization, or stuff like this. That is just not binding yet. And I think this legislation is a really good opportunity to make these treaties that we all signed, to make them binding. And through this, like also, like fight against pollution or chemical emissions in general, for example, outside of Europe. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are treaties already, or there are, we already like said, okay, this is not okay in some way, but just governments or people do not really care, and we can change it through this.
And it's more of a comment than anything from the chat. Person saying the issue of climate change reminds him a bit of the prisoner dilemma, which is if you don't have a central world government, the outcome could be pretty bad for everyone. And so the idea that and companies are saying but even if we do our best to be sustainable, to respect human rights, there are companies outside of Europe that will not respect these rules, and so we will find ourselves in a weaker position. And so how do we deal with that? The fact that sometimes the idea that Europe might be taking strong protection for itself, but in competition with the rest of the world, it might make its own economy weaker, let's say, competitively speaking.
Yeah. I see this danger, but I think we don't have to take this too serious, because I would rather expect some kind of Brussels effect, you know, like as I said, we are one of the biggest single markets. We can be really leading, and our standards can be adopted like worldwide, because I mean, like we basically have to create this front runner effect, and when we say, okay, we have a certain standard and we implement that, then most other countries are better off if they comply with our standards and adapt to this one and go climate neutral, than if they try to keep on polluting but have no market access anymore. That's, for example, also one part in the battery regulation. Like that's the very first time we introduce a CO2 footprint for batteries, so that we basically kick out the polluters. You know, like companies have to like show how much emissions they have in their battery production. And so, now, of course, there's a global incentive because everybody wants to sell batteries to Europe, of course. There's a global incentive to produce batteries only with renewable energies, or in general with to work on renewable energies. And I think this is it's a huge chance, or we have to use our power to push in exactly this direction.
So now let's talk a bit, let's go away from policy and talk about the EU and its future in general. So the Parliament itself has been asking for quite some time now for a revision of the treaties. It had officially asked the Council for the convocation of a convention, as it is called. And last week, President von der Leyen endorsed as well, saying that she supported the convocation of a EU convention to revise the treaties. But this more, and all that requires now the Council, so the member state, to accept, and so to launch the process. And this morning, there was Politico that was saying that actually there is a majority of member states, Politico is saying at least 17, that are opposed to launch a convention. And basically they're saying, with the war in Ukraine, we can't go into a revision of the treaties. So what do you think about this? Is it a valid excuse not to start the revision of the treaties, or is it irrelevant as an excuse?
Well, I mean, like, of course, like we need to get rid of this anonymity thing in so many areas, and therefore we need to open up the treaties and to start this process. But I'm not an expert on this. Of course, I see the urgency why we need it, but I don't see it practically happen because there are also quite some member states that will not give their agreement on certain points. I hope we will get there, but I don't really see it happen at the moment. But as I said, I'm absolutely not an expert on this one. I can really recommend to ask Daniel Freund, my colleague, on this. He is the perfect one to ask in this regard. I trust him completely. So just ask him on my behalf.
He came on the channel last year, so maybe that can be an excuse to have him again on the channel to ask him, okay, let's do an update on the Twitchy original, which actually would make for a good show, I think. But still on that topic, forget the procedure, forget the member state having to approve things. If you can snap your fingers, you change anything about the EU, the way it works, what would you change and why? Easy question, I know.
Like only one thing, or
what comes first to mind? Let's say. Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, like I would just kill all these anonymity. It's called, I would kill all these anonymity things and do it to a majority or maybe three quarters or something.
Yeah, so QNV, yeah.
I would just kill the option of a member state to block something if it's only one or two of them. So this is just like, this is like breaking so much, or this is like stopping us from so much. And especially if we look into to taxes, for example, you know, it's just so stupid. We're creating loopholes and we're creating like niche markets and stuff like this. And I would also, I would really go away from the directives and do far more regulations, so that they are not like some countries creating niche markets, exploiting the others because of weaker ruling. And I think this is the first thing that comes to my mind that I would change, like in the broader view.
And since time is running out, I will ask you the final question, the traditional question that we ask at the end of every interview. Where do you place yourself in all the debates about a federal European Union? Are you in favor? Are you against? Are you on the fence? What's your thought?
I'm totally in favor, because I think it just makes sense. To get rid of parallel structures that do the same. It's just inefficient to have so many different competing systems if we clearly have like a good working thing. So I would give far more competence to the European level and get rid of these national states more and more.
That's very clear. So thank you very much, Malte Gallée, for taking the time to answer my questions and the question of the chat tonight. Before I let you go, if you have one message to give to the audience, the one thing they need to remember from you tonight, what would be your message to them?
Stay active, stay awake, and always have in mind that you have far more influence than you might think. You can also get active on the very files that are on the table in this very moment. Just get into detail, reach out to your MEPs or whatever, and annoy them with your amendments. European democracy is far more transparent and fluid and than we think. I have experienced it now on my own body, let's say. European democracy works. I can speak from experience.
That's perfect. That works for me. Thank you very much, Malte Gallée. Chat, make sure to thank him for his time. You can follow him on Twitter. You have the Twitter at just below the video feed. Have a good evening, Mr. Gallée. Hope to see you in the future. Enjoy your evening.
They can also follow me on Instagram, because there I'm actually far more active normally.
Okay, well,
it's the same handle. It's
the same handle. So Twitter,
I think
Insta.
It's a really nice handle. Oh,
I like it.
Also, thank you. I'm also on TikTok, and there I got also a really nice handle. It's called Polite Pilot.
Wow, you're inventive for your handle. But well. Yeah, I will go check it out actually, because it's not often that we have MEPs on TikTok, so I will go check it out. But yeah, thank you very much.
Not too active there, but it will come. It will come. Oh,
perfect.
Wait. Oh shit! Wait! I just saw. I missed Be Real. Do you know Be Real?
I've seen things on Twitter, but I haven't checked out the platform.
Do you want to appear on my Be Real right now?
Let's appear on the Be Real.
Okay then.
Hello. So how does it work? I'm just saying hi. Okay, I'm doing this.
Yeah, no, it's there. It's done.
Okay, I see.
Perfect.
Great. Well, I'm famous on your Be Real, so great.
You are. Nice.
Great.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye. Okay, bye, chat. Bye. Let's start the debrief. What I will do is I will throw you an ad, just the time for me to switch the cameras and all the good stuff. So I'll see you in 30 seconds. Stay with me. In the meantime, I just have to turn off Zoom and all. I mean, of course, those of you who are subscribed, you won't see the ad. You'll just have to bear with me while I finish and I do my nice transition, completely professional, because I only have one camera, so it's kind of a mess. I have to do that manually every time. But it's for a good cause. Hey, chat, how are we doing? Okay, so we have 15 more seconds of ad, so I will drink my water in the meantime. Very good water. Stay hydrated. Up. I will answer to that later. Okay. No, I already threw an ad. It's not to have another one right now. Go away, thing. All right. Hey, no brains. Let me guess, you missed again the alert and you're arriving at the end. Don't worry, man. It's no big deal. You could catch up the replay as usual. But before, I mean, you still get to follow the debrief, so you haven't lost everything. So what did we talk about today? We talked a lot about circular economy. So it's not a topic I'm very knowledgeable about. So I won't be able to provide a lot of additional explanation, a lot of additional context. But that's, let's say, to put in the general context. It's not that you were AFK watching Macron at the UN. Or Putin is addressing the UN. I know he's not attending the UN General Assembly, but I didn't know he was recording a message, which would make sense that he records a message. But yeah, okay. I mean, let me know. Not UN, but the nation. Oh, he's making a national address. Oh, is it tonight that he's going to announce the general mobilization? Because for those of you who don't follow, so there is in Ukraine, in the Donetsk region, so one of the separatist region of Ukraine that started, or at least was used as an excuse for Russia to invade Ukraine. Russia is now pushing for a pseudo referendum that will be organized by the end of the week, by the end of next week, and the referendum will be about Donetsk becoming part of Russia, like Russia did in Crimea. They want to do exactly the same, but in Donetsk, which is a complete bullshit. I mean, there's no way this referendum can be anything but fake and whatever. But the stakes there is that then it would, if Ukraine was to actually enter Donetsk, and it's already partly in Donetsk, that would, from the legal point of view of Russia, which is complete bullshit from the point of view of international law, for them it would be an invasion of their territory, and so Putin could be saying, "Oh well, careful, we're going to use nukes and all that," and also it gives him an excuse to pronounce a general mobilization, so to beef up, or at least try to, beef up the Russian army, which created all of the let's say strand of issues in Russia. But well, let's not dive into it. Otherwise, we could spend an entire hour just talking about this. Let's go back to the topic of circular economy and the interview. Shadow Ghosts versus Virgin Putin, exactly. So yeah, circular economy. So it's part of the so-called Green Deal. The Green Deal is this big. It's the name of the EU policy for environment since 2019. It's actually in 2019 it was defined by the European Commission, so by Ursula von der Leyen, as the top priority of the Commission. Of course, since then there's been COVID. Now there's the war in Ukraine, but still, it's one of the absolute top priority of the EU to beef up, let's say, the environmental policies of the EU. Even if before that the EU was already among the most advanced, let's say, continent in the field of environmental policy, but in the fight of climate change, they wanted to go even further. And so the Green Deal is the name of the general package, all the measures that are being done, and there's a shit ton of things in there. And so we are in there, like the overarching, like the main thing. So you have the Green Deal, and then the first thing that the EU did is pass what is called the climate law. The climate law is a legislation, so it's mandatory for the EU. And in this climate law, it is said that the EU commits to become climate neutral by 2050. So that means that in 2050, the EU must be carbon neutral. It must not emit. It must emit the same amount of. Well, no, not the same. It must not emit any more carbon dioxide than it consumes. So it must be 0% by 2050. And there is an intermediary target, which is in 2030, there must be a reduction of carbon emission of 55%. So you have this target in 2030, and then the ultimate target is 2050, becoming climate neutral, which would make the EU the only climate neutral continent on the planet at the moment. And so within that, you have a lot of things. You have the circular economy, so the whole waste management, recycling, reuse of products, so that to generate less waste and so pollute less. You have the aspect, of course, on pure environmental policy, deforestation. You have agricultural policy that has an impact. So it's sort of like a very, very ambitious package there. Hello, real talk. Of things, and now they are. The problem is that with COVID and with even now the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis, now you have tensions with the Green Deals, in the sense that if we take just the question of agriculture, so you know that since maybe you don't know, and in which case I will explain to you, there is a food crisis since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, because Ukraine and Russia are huge exporters of foodstuff, of mostly grains and stuff like that, around the world. And since the beginning of the war, of course, Ukraine and Russia do not export as much, especially Ukraine. Now Ukraine is starting to re-export a bit, but it's nowhere near all the exportation that the Ukraine was doing back in the days. And so it creates tension on the market. There is a bit of a food crisis, not in the EU. In the EU, there are an increase of the price because of energy and all that, but it's mostly outside of the EU. You have quite a lot of countries, especially like in Mashrek, so Egypt, Ethiopia, these kind of countries, were relying a lot on grain imported from Ukraine, and since there was no import, they couldn't afford to buy things on the market. So there's a crisis at the moment, and now it creates a tension with the Green Deals, because one part of the Green Deal was, let's instead of always producing more food, let's stabilize it or even reduce our production as a form of consequence. So now there's this discussion, the tension, saying, okay, at the time where we have a food crisis, should we reduce our food consumption, our food production? So it's part of the debate about that. There's quite a bit of tension on the compatibility between the climate change policies and the other crises, whether energy, whether food, etc. So it's just to give you the overall thing. What did we talk about? Talk about the job of MEP, the fact that to get information, he relies a lot on lobbyists to get information. So he said lobbyists are an issue. But I'm a lobbyist, so of course I personally disagree with the idea that lobbying is an issue, and he nuanced a bit his view afterwards, in the sense, at least that I appreciate, he did recognize that lobbyists from NGOs are also lobbyists and doing lobbying. They don't always recognize that. So here he did recognize that, so good point for him. But yeah, lobbying is a big thing, is the main source of information for MEPs. That's how you get information, and he said that I'm not knowledgeable on everything, and I have to manage the information to know more about and be able to do my job. And indeed, the job of MEPs and also assistant, generally speaking, the job of the institutions is to manage information. In fact, the main challenge is that you have too much information. You're constantly bombarded by information, people who give you information, whether it's some things that you are interested in, but you always get a ton of information, constantly. And your job is to filter through the information and get what is interesting, what is useful for you. And so that's part of the job of the assistants, notably to sort through this mess of information and use the information that is useful for you and for MEP. And when you're outside the institution, the contrary is that you don't have enough information and you want to give information to the other. So it's the reverse. Sometimes you lack information because you're not the target of all information, so you don't know things and you want to know. You have to go ask MEPs and you have to go ask people, okay, what's going on? Give me information. Information is in French we say the nerf de la guerre. It's the main currency in Brussels at a lot of levels. What else did we say? Oh yes, I know that Andros, you enjoyed that one. The fact that he said that MEPs are more powerful than national MPs. On that, I'm not certain. I mean, you can't make a direct comparison, like to be fair, between national member of parliament and European members of European Parliament. On some point, MEPs have more power. On some other national parliament has more power. Like exactly, like Andres, you're right. One of the big difference between the national parliament and the European Parliament is that the European Parliament does not have the power to create law. The law can only be created by the Commission. The Commission can make proposals. And in most, in pretty much all national parliament, the parliament can propose law, and the European Parliament does not have this power. So that's one of the big difference between the national parliament and the European Parliament. But at the same time, there are a number of areas where, as a member of the European Parliament, you have more power than the national parliament. Also, depending on the cultural, the political culture in the different member states. But like, for instance, if you're working on, or if you're interested into trade, an MEP has much more power on trade than any national member of parliament, for one simple reason. Trade is an exclusive competence of the EU. So only the EU can make law and create trade agreements with third countries. So of course, MEPs have much more power than their counterparts at national level. And basically, wherever you have an exclusive competence of the EU, there is more power from the European Parliament. And you can also make the argument that since in a lot of, even if you don't have an exclusive competence, since the European Parliament builds the law at EU level, so it provides the framework for the entire EU, you have, to an extent, more liberty to create things than the national MPs. But it's a debate. I think I would be more on the side that, actually, I was going to say that MPs I was on the side of MPs being more powerful than European Parliament, but I'm not even sure. It really depends. It really depends. Yeah, I think like by a small bit, I would say national MPs have more power than European Parliament MEPs. But it really depends, and it's you can perfectly make the opposite argument that MEPs are more powerful than national MPs. That's a perfectly valid point, and you could definitely defend that point of view. I could defend it on a number of issues. What else did we talk about? That's a point that came at different points in the interview, so I'll cover it now. The idea that's especially since I think it was Vintology who was raising the issue of the prisoner dilemma. The idea that so it comes down to the influence that the EU has, how influential can be the European Union, and so make sure that even if we're making laws in our, I don't want to say our small European Union because it's big, but in the European Union, it can influence the outside world, and the outside world will actually copy what the European Union is doing, and so that's the so-called Brussels effect. The Brussels effect, it's a theory that was, ironically enough, developed in the US. It's someone from, I always say Harvard, but half of the time I got it wrong. It's from one of the big Ivy Leagues university in the US, and so the theory is saying that because of the way the EU works, there is a Brussels effect, meaning that the rules of Brussels apply outside of the EU, even if there is no extraterritoriality, meaning that it's not that the EU will say, well, my law, you in Kazakhstan, you have to apply EU law. It's just that even without that, Kazakhstan will have an incentive to copy EU law and or to respect it. Why? Because there is because of the size of the market. The EU is one of the biggest markets in the world. It's valued heavily by many companies outside of the EU. The fact that there is more or less central enforcement of the rules by the European Commission on common rules, etc. That means that there is a high incentive for actors outside of the EU to copy the EU rules. Like the typical example of that, it's in the field of competition law and in the field of data protection. GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation, so the big European law on protecting personal data. That's the typical example, because the EU created the GDPR, and what we saw is that a number of countries afterwards copied the rules of GDPR in their countries. They looked at the rules, say, okay, those rules are going to apply in the EU. It looks like a good model. We're going to copy it. And also, you have companies outside of the EU who say, okay, I have to comply with GDPR in the EU, so I will actually design my website so that it respects the GDPR, even if the country I am in there is no GDPR. So it's the bit this idea of the capacity of the EU to influence the outside world because of its size, because of its market power. It's the core of the power of the EU, the power of the influence of the EU comes from the market power of the EU. EU can only be as influential as economically prosperous it is. This one is going to drain us a lot. I don't think so. I mean, even if winter is going to drain us a bit, the EU is still going to be one of the biggest economy in the world. So, and the energy crisis is going to hit everyone as well. So, yes, the winter is going to have an effect. Of course, we already are seeing the economic effects of the energy crisis and all that. But it's not going to change dramatically the influence of the EU or its power. On the contrary, in the long term, I would say on the contrary, because it would create, let's say, the energy crisis is accelerating a number of trends that could ultimately reduce some dependency, and so in the end make it a bit more solid and less reliant on others. But yeah, if it's very costly to copy an EU rule, it will less likely to be copied. It's true if you don't need access to the EU market, and that's a big difference, and that's part of the new set of rules that are being done now. So you have the rule that is in the EU, and what we see is more and more rules that actually aim to penalize products or content that comes from outside the EU but does not respect the EU rules. Like the typical example now is the rules on carbon imports. So if you import, let's say, steel coming from India, if in India there is no, let's say, equivalent of the carbon market that allows to, let's say, you have to buy basically carbon emission permit. So it's a way to incentivize to produce, to generate less carbon and to pollute less. And so if the Indian steel does not have already in India follows these rules compared to European steel that has to follow these rules, then to, let's say, level the playing field, there will be a taxation, an extra cost put on the Indian steel so that it matches a bit the European steel. So there will be a penalty if you don't follow the rules. Same now, the van der Leyen already announced it last year, and it's going to be, I think, I don't remember if it was presented this week or it's going to be presented in the coming weeks. There is a new forced labor regulation that will forbid to import products that were created through forced labor. Like, actually, it's targeting China, like the old Uyghur situation, where you have like the Uyghur population in Xinjiang that is being parked. Some people call it a genocide. It's absolutely terrible. There's a lot of forced labor, and so the EU would be banning products that are made from forced labor to be imported in the EU. So you see more and more of these things that say, okay, we have the rules in the EU. If you don't follow the rules of the EU, you can't enter the market. And you can't like benefit from the fact that you have a cheaper cost and not environmental friendly practices. You can't enter the EU market. That's more and more the way things are being done. So it means that the fact that it's costly, it's let's say it becomes as costly or more costly not to have not to copy the EU rules or to apply the EU standards in this sense. Companies will always work with major countries and economic alliance. Yes, that's why I was saying about market access. What else do I have on my little thing? Energy independence. Why did I write that down? I forgot where I wrote that down. So energy independence. Let's participate to the whole green transition. Let's say. I'm losing my word. The fact that we're getting rid of the Russian gas, for instance. Well, now we're trying to that doesn't mean that we stop using gas. We're diversifying our sources, and there's there's an emphasis on bigger investment in renewables, in all alternative sources of energy. Some countries nuclear, ironically some other countries coal, for instance. So there is this push. A big push for energy independence and energy sovereignty, as we call it in Brussels. And generally speaking, like the theme of sovereignty, of strategic sovereignty, is a big thing in the EU over the past few years. It's a push for the EU to become more self-reliant, that we don't rely on Russian gas to produce, and so if we have a crisis with the Russians, then we're fucked because we don't have access to Russian gas. Same thing for what is called the critical raw materials. So think about lithium, think about rare earths that are mostly being extracted in China or processed in Taiwan, and so we're trying to find ways to make ourselves less reliable. Global market is a lot larger than just the EU market. China isn't going to copy EU rules, for example. True. That's why there is another thing, which is called standards, which is one of the strategic stakes of trade deals, actually. Because one of the reasons the EU is pushing for trade deals is not only because the EU is trade friendly, it's also because it's another way for the EU to push its influence. Why? Because the EU is a big market. It's not the only market in the world. You are right, and China is a big market, although it's also a market that is quite integrated with the West. So it does rely a lot on Western products, and also on the Western economies buying stuff from China. If they import things from China, that means that the stuff they import must respect EU rules, of course. But one of the stakes in trade is that the more you have trade deals, the more you set the standards. Why? Since the EU market is a huge market, you want to have access to that. If you pass a trade deal, let's say Canada wants to have access as a trade deal with the EU. It's called CETA, and so there is now free trade between Canada and the EU. And so one of the part of the trade deals is to say, okay, when it's possible, we try to align, or we try to align our norms, our standards, so that a product that is made in Canada would be valid in the EU, and a product that is created in the EU would be valid in Canada. It's not working on everything. Like for instance, on some let's say food stuff, it doesn't work like that. Like for instance, the famous chicken with chloride on it. Even if they produce it in Canada, it's forbidden in the EU, so it would never go into the EU, even with the trade deal. But generally speaking, there is this attempt to, let's say, get the different standard closer, and so it creates a model. And the more trade deal you have, that means the more you have similar standard. And of course, usually in these circumstances, the balance goes to the bigger actor, meaning that in many cases, the EU is usually bigger than the other part of the trade deal. The EU is bigger than Canada, so that means that likely Canada had to do a bit more efforts than the EU in terms of standards. And so when you take all that together, the idea is that you make the European standard the global standard, because all the big economies, or a lot of economies, will be linked to the EU, and so they will want an access to the EU market. They will produce the content, they produce the products so that they can be exported to the EU market, and so they will make their standards based on European standards, which means that de facto European standards is exported everywhere. And it's a strategic aspect of trade deals. Why? Because part of the strategic aspect into this is that the trade deals that you are concluding now, yesterday, etc., will determine the global standards in 20, 30, 40 years in the future. It will determine whether the standards tend to be more Europeans, or more Chinese, or more American. And so the bigger the market, the most trade deals you have, the more likely is it that your standard is going to be the standard of everyone else, even those you don't have trade deal with. Because let's say, take Canada again. Let's say China wants to export its stuff to Canada. Since the stuff in Canada has to be able to be exported then to the EU, well, Canada will say, yeah, okay, but your Chinese product has to be more. You have to follow the rules on this stuff, because then we also have the rules of the EU that applies, or that we must be able to export there. So that means that Chinese will have to de facto adopt European standards, because Canada has links with European standards, and so on and so forth. So there is a way that China is, well, I don't want to say China will follow the EU standards, but that the EU will not have to follow the Chinese standards at the very least. Even if the EU is not as big a market as China. And even then, it's debatable, because the Chinese market is not completely open. It's very complicated to get in. It's all issue to go into the Chinese market. But anyway, what else did I have? That's pretty much it. I see the time, so I don't want to go into another rant for 20 minutes on something completely unrelated. So if you have a question or comments, now is the time. Otherwise, I will start my little conclusion. China has a big internal market, making it harder to influence them via trade deal. That's true, and that's why the EU does also. One of the reasons why the EU does not have a trade deal per se. We have an investment deal that is in the fridge and probably will be killed off at the first occasion, but we don't have a trade deal. Just 1.5 page so far. Well, you've been more prolific than that. But yeah, I mean, the fact that China has a big internal market, China, the fact that China will not adopt the European rules, yes, okay, fine. That's I would say that's logical. They operate on a different model than the Europeans, a completely different models than the Europeans and the Americans. USA is doing a trade war against China, indeed, and the Chinese hasn't budged yet. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is definitely a clear opposition on pretty much all level between the China and the US. And the EU is, I don't want to say it's in the middle. It's not completely middle. It's a bit more on the US side, but it's not completely on the US side either. But the fact that China doesn't copy paste the rules of the EU is not to be seen as a defeat, nor was it expected to have China copy paste the rules of the EU. But the EU and the US are combined are more powerful than China. It's true. It's true. Even if they don't have, I mean, again, the whole EU-China relation is an old other mess. It's quite similar to an extent to EU-Russia relations, because we have Germany. Germany has built its economic prosperity since the 90s on the economic rise of China. So, like, I don't want to say the first, but like one of the first trade partner of Germany right now is China. So the German economy is runs well because of the Chinese markets. just like the German markets were running because they were using Russian gas. And so of course that makes very complicated the at EU level the managing the relationship with China. So and that's one of the reasons why like the US and the EU are not aligned completely on China. I would say that the US have a much more adversarial, so they're much more opposed to China than the EU is. Nations within the EU can still do trade deals on their own. No, you can't. The only one who can do trade deals is the EU. France cannot go to another country and say, okay, I'm going to sign a trade deal with you. It's just the EU because since we have a single market, so imagine that the market has borders. Everything that enters the borders, it's the EU. So products that come from the outside can only be dealt with through the EU. So nation with the EU can still do trade deals on their own. I mean, there's two different things. It's trade deals and general trade with countries are two different things. Trade deals are a specific framework. It's a specific deal, or specific advantages, recognition that you give to trade between one space and another. So the EU has a specific trade relation with Canada, with specific rules, specific exceptional rules that apply only to trade with Canada. And so there is a trade deal between the EU and Canada. There is no trade deal between the EU and China, but a French, a German, a Polish can trade with China because there is no restriction. It's just that the trade is going to be done on the basic of general trade law, so the rules of the OMC, so with the WTO of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is the general, let's say, the international framework for trade. And so, without a European specific trade deals, the rules will be only those of the WTO. How can Germany work with China if the trade deals does? Okay, that's I was explaining. So you don't absolutely need a EU trade deal to do trade with another country. A EU trade deal, it gives advantages. It's an advantageous trade relation between the EU and another set of country. So that's a different type of relation. So if I give let's say that you trade with China, you can trade on this level of rules, which is the WTO rules. You trade with Canada, you have this level of rules that are set by the EU, which are more advantageous because you will have lighter checks on customs. You will have easier access to the markets, these kind of things. But otherwise, if you don't have a trade deal, everyone is at the same level. It's the WTO trade rules. Okay, well, on this note, I think we can finish, I think. So I hope that you enjoyed the interview. It was interesting. It was different topics that we discuss usually, so it was refreshing. As usual, if you like what you saw, follow me on the social media. You can... Oh shit, if I don't write in the chat, that's not gonna work. There you go. There you go. You just have to click. You can follow on Twitter, on Discord, on YouTube, on all the good things. You just have to click and you have everything. If you really like what you saw, you can, of course, subscribe. That's always appreciated. You can also toss a coin to your streamer via Coffee. Next time we're going to see each other is next week for a new set of interviews. I'm still sorting out the final details, but I'll let you know by... I don't want to say by the end of the week because actually sorry, I'm completely missing lost. Actually, I'm seeing you before next week. I'm seeing you tomorrow. We have an interview specifically with the European Commission on the European Bauhaus, which is a specific EU policy linked to the Green Deal and the big cultural as well. It's weird. Nobody understands a bit what it is. So the Commission is going to explain us what the hell is this new European Bauhaus. So it's going to be tomorrow at 8. So we will see each other tomorrow and then it will be next week. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you tomorrow, and I wish you all a good evening. Bye, guys. See you.